Hello everyone, my name is Haj and photography is my main hobby. Last time I made a video on why I decided to buy the Nikon Z9, and today then I will talk about my finding while comparing the Nikon Z9 with the FTZ adapter, because I don't have Z lens, I only have F lenses. Compare then with my D850 and my D500. And while initially I was planning to test 3 lenses, I could only do it with the Nikon 500mm f4, which is shown here. It is the G version, not the FL version. And I was also using the 1.4 teleconverter and the 2x teleconverter. So let's start first with what I find great with the Z9. First of all, it's a great camera, and the main reason why I bought the Z9 is because of subject detection and autofocus, and the Z9 actually do not disappoint in that regard, as long as the subject is actually big enough in the viewfinder, and then it does not have any problem at all. However, when it's like very small, like the case of the deer here in this example, the camera just could not recognize them as a deer, or those little birds on the road, the camera just could not recognize them as a bird. But that I kind of expected, because the subject is only a tiny point in the frame. However, as soon as I approached a little bit with the deer, for example, or when I attached the 2x teleconverter, and then the camera was able to recognize them as animal. Another advantage of the Z9 is also then the eye detection function. So for example, in this picture, I took it with the D850, and you might notice that actually the camera focused on the beak of the rooster, not actually on the eye of the rooster. That situation would not have happened, in my opinion, if I would have used the Z9. Another reason why I took also the leap on buying the Z9 is there is no need to do the autofocus fine-tuning anymore. Back with my D850 and D500, almost all my lenses are autofocus fine-tuned. And that's just bare lens. And once I'm attaching a 1.4 teleconverter, the adjustment is even bigger. And with the 2x teleconverter, sometimes I could not even fine-tune the lens anymore. But that day is over with the Z9. Not even one single lens that I have actually need any focus fine-tuning. One great thing that I find with the Z9 compared to the DSLR camera as well is actually the focus point coverage. With the Z9 you can place your subject anywhere in the frame and the camera will focus on it. While with the DSLR camera, the most sensitive autofocus point is actually the center focus point. So I always tend to frame my bird in a way that it stays right in the middle, and then later on, anyway, most of the time when it's small birds, I need to crop quite lots of the picture. But sometimes you just want the subject to be a little bit skewed left and right, and you want a little bit of environment shot. And to do that with the DSLR, you will need then to focus and then recompose, or focus somewhere else in the same focus plane as the bird. and of course you risk to lose focus of your animal. With the Z9 you can like frame it exactly where you want it to be and then take the picture. It doesn't matter, the focusing speed is the same, either the animal is on the side or in the middle. And it's funny because I'm so used with the D500 and the D850 that most of the shot I took, I was still kind of like always framing the subject right in the middle. But I hope in the future I will then start to get used to it and start to think more about my composition. In addition, the distribution of the focusing point on the DSLR camera is concentrated in the middle of the frame. And for example, in the case of this rooster, if I would have kept the focus point on the head of the rooster, I would have to crop the feet of the animal. While if I keep the feet in the frame, and then I will have to focus on the neck or the body of the rooster, which I did. Otherwise, I will have them to focus on the head, and then hopefully the animal don't move, and then recompose the shot. Talking still about autofocus, all three cameras, the Z9, the D850 and the D500, all have the 3D tracking function. Actually, the 3D tracking function was in the DSLR camera and only arrived in the mirrorless in the Z9. The Z6 and the Z7 don't have the 3D tracking. And I'm pretty amazed on how the 3D tracking in the Z9 works. It is very sticky. Once it got the subject, it does not let it go. While with the D850 and the D500, sometimes it's kind of still jump around a little bit, like on the head, on the neck of the animal. In addition, the 3D tracking is actually working nicely with the Z9, even with the 2x teleconverter attached to the 500mm f4. So it's actually a 1000mm f8 lens. While with the D500 and the D850, the 3D tracking is already gone as soon as you have a lens which have an aperture smaller than f5.6. So that is also then a plus for people who are wondering if they want to move to the Z ecosystem. And something that I did not wanted to test, but Mother Nature just show up, is actually the weather sealing. At the end of my test, it was actually downpouring, and my camera and the lens was actually completely soaked. And I had the FTZ adapter with the 2x teleconverter and the lens attached to it. And once I arrived home, I just wipe everything dry, and then, yeah, everything works still fine. That's what I find like great so far. But because no camera is perfect, I also find like a little comments about the Z9. I think it's not really something I don't like. It's more like, well, I would say would be an improvement if it's there. So what I find not so good is actually the noise when the camera start up. The Z9 is such a silent camera compared to the D850 and the D500, especially when you take a continuous shooting. Like, listen, for example, that is the D500, and the D850 is that. It sounds like if you are shooting your subject with a machine gun, and it's very distracting. And there are also maybe some events when you don't want to be so noisy, and I think the Z9 will be perfect for that situation. However, because it's such a silent camera, the startup noise is actually very noticeable. Like there is this and it would have been nice if it would be a little bit down. And another thing I noticed as well is that I find the navigation pad, you hear that? I find the navigation pad on the rear of the camera quite sharp on the finger. After shooting for like a couple of hours, it starts to hurt on my thumb. I have a very sensitive fingers. Maybe for other people it's not a problem. I never had that problem with my D850 and D500. Talking about layout, still I found it also quite annoying that they moved the image review button down here instead of up there. I'm so used with the D850 and the D500, and I always keep like pressing on that top left corner, and then like, oh no, that's actually the protect button, it's not the review button. And I wish Nikon did not move it down there, but maybe there is a reason. But again, it's not really a big deal. I think once you get used to the camera, it should not be an issue. The next thing I noticed as well is that I find the shutter button of the Z9 a little bit like angled a little bit more than the D850 and the D500. I kind of find it easier to slide around between ISO and exposure compensation on the DSLR than on the Z9. But again, I think maybe just because I'm not used to it yet. We'll see how it goes. Let me know, how do you find the shutter release of the Z9? Is it better for you now than with the D850? But yeah, it's not a deal breaker. I think once you get used to the camera, you will just find it just like the D850 and the D500. The things that worried me, however, is actually the VR system. When I first tested my Z9, I was using my 600mm f4, which is the old version without the VR, and I did not notice that actually as soon as I turn on the camera, the VR is activated with my 500mm f4. With the DSLR, the VR is only activated once you half press the button. But even when I was like just carrying my lens around, I could hear actually the VR active in the lens. And I think it might actually drain the battery quicker, but also what really concerned me is actually the lifespan of the VR, because VR is not a cheap component to replace once it's dead. So it would be nice if it is possible actually to not activate the VR right away as you turn on the camera, but only after you half press the shutter. Maybe there is a function somewhere in the camera but that I'm not aware of, so please let me know if you know about it. The next kind of issue I found as well is actually on the autofocus system. The autofocus on the camera is very fast, but there are just some situations where it's kind of letting me down a little bit. Like many of you maybe, I was checking on the internet once I received my Z9 on what can I do with the camera, what setting can I use, and because most of them are kind of new for me. And I heard about this hybrid focusing. Basically what it means is you use wide area autofocus or small area autofocus on the shutter to kind of initialize the focus. And once the camera recognizes the subject, you pass the 3D tracking to the iPhone button. And it works like a charm with big animal or like slow moving animal. But when it comes to little bird, which is like jumping around all the time, I find it a little bit too slow, because you press here to initialize the focus, and then you press the iPhone, and then you take the shot, and then actually there's only branch left because the bird is already gone. So now for me, I have on Photoshoot Bank A, I have then the hybrid focusing techniques for big birds or big animals, slow moving animals. And in Bank A, I have my focusing techniques for small birds, which is just then 3D tracking right on the iPhone button and nothing on the shutter. And I find it actually working better than using the hybrid focusing system. Again, maybe it's just because I'm still new to the camera, and maybe my reaction time will improve the more I play with it. But for now, I think I will stick with that. Another thing that I noticed as well when it comes to autofocus is that sometimes the Z9 make an unexpected choices. When I first got the camera, my wife and I was talking about this animal detection function, and then she said like, oh, so actually then, if there are two animals in the frame, which one will the camera decide to focus on and to track? And I was telling her like, well, it should be the animal below the focus area, and then the animal, and then the camera should then keep track of that subject where you initialize the focus. And I wish it is, because actually it's not. For example, in this picture where I was taking picture of those two pigeons, the autofocus point was keeping jumping between the head of the bird, like on the left and then the right, on the left and the right. It was also the same case for this picture where I took a picture of this herd of deers, where actually the focus point was jumping between deers and deers. And it was not a big deal because the animal were all anyway in the same focusing plan, so it does not change much. But I wish that the focus point will stay where you initialize the focus. I don't know, maybe I missed something somewhere, or maybe if it's a general pattern, maybe Nikon will come up with some firmware updates. And I find the first focus acquisition of the Z9 slightly slower than the D500. I mean, it's a fast camera, but I'm so used with the D500, I think. Is it just me, or is it the reality? I cannot really tell, because I just had the camera for a couple of weeks. But for now, I find it slightly slow. I think it's more like kind of in the level of the D850. I'm not talking here about the tracking. The tracking, the Z9 beat the D500 and the D850 when it comes to tracking. I'm just talking about the first acquisition of focus. And the last point, but not the least, is that I find the Z9 a little bit lazy. What do I mean by that? Back in the DSLR days, we used to complain about the camera hunting back and forth, not finding the subject. Now that I'm thinking about it, actually, maybe it's not a bad thing. I think it means like actually the camera is trying to find the subject and not giving up. But with the Z9, I kind of have the feeling that actually it's kind of looking for the subject once, twice, And if it does not find it, and then it just give up. It does not hunt. And then there are some situations when I have to kind of like give it a little help, like, well, hey, the subject is a little bit there, look, it's there, and then yeah, he will find it. But it's not happening often, but when it happens, it's like, oh, a bit frustrating, like, oh, come on, you lazy camera, keep searching, it's right there in front of you. So yeah, back in the old days, hunting was a bad thing, like, oh, my camera hunts, cannot focus, but I kind of find now, like, well, why is my Z9 not trying a little bit more to look for the subject? Anyway, those are not something like a deal breaker. I'm very happy with the camera. I'm keeping it and I will use it. But it's just like a wish for, I would say, an improvement. And anyway, most of them are more like kind of my lack of personal experience with the camera actually. So I will keep testing the camera, maybe with different lenses next time, maybe also with the 1.7 teleconverter. So stay tuned, and until next time then, bye.